Welcome to the Divine Style podcast, where the journey to self-love and spiritual awakening begins. I'm your host, Gerlinda Stella, a psychic medium, intuitive life coach, and guide on your path to self-discovery. Here we delve deep into the heart of what it means to truly know and love oneself. Thank you for joining us for part 2 of this conversation. Maggy Whitehouse is a minister from Devon, an acclaimed author of 17 books, a distinguished Kabbalah teacher, and an expert in Bible metaphysics. Her unique blend of wisdom, insight, and experience makes for an enlightening conversation. When I've mentioned to people that I have started to read about Kabbalah, I find it really interesting because people tend to have this association that it's evil and has something to do with the Cabal. Would you be able to explain this further?
It's important to mention that I'm not a member of the Kabbalah Center. I have nothing to do with them whatsoever. Teaching of Kabbalah I follow is called the Toledano tradition. Now, nearly all the Kabbalah you'll come across nowadays is what we call Lurianic Kabbalah, which was developed in the 13th century after the Spanish Inquisition, when the Hebrews were expelled from Spain and Portugal. And they said, how can this happen to us? How can bad things happen to good people? And a charismatic rabbi called Isaac Luria had an insight from God that when God created the universe, he made a mistake, which meant that the vessels into which the light flowed were shattered, which allowed an external evil, which Christians would call the devil, to come into the world. And at the time that Luria's teachings went out, this was about just before the printing press was developed, and his teachings took off like wildfire because it justified the people in about what had happened to them. It took away the notion of perhaps karma, that they had in a previous life hurt others, you don't know. But it took off like wildfire. And of course, it went out into the Christian community too through Christian mystics, and it became the stuff that was written down in books. But the Kabbalah I follow, because I study the Bible, is the earliest sort, which basically believes that when God created the universe, it was all good, which is what it says in Genesis. And the whole of the Bible is written on that understanding. So I must use that tradition. That the only cause of evil in our tradition is the misuse of human will. There is no other evil. Earthquakes and volcanoes are not evil. They're just planets sneezing. These things happen. What is evil is when we don't take care of people when the planet sneezes. But I'm definitely a Toledano Kabbalist. I'm nothing to do with the Kabbalah Center. And all Kabbalistic teaching in this tradition is offered. Workshops you pay for, books you pay for, absolutely. But the teaching is offered for free because it's important. And it's part of the work with a capital W. I know that the Kabbalah Center requires you to tithe to it. So that's fine. And you don't have to have an objection to that whatsoever. And I have Lurianic Kabbalists on my Kabbalah group, and we discuss it all the time. And sometimes we agree to disagree. Sometimes we say, okay, so how could this have been formed and how could this happen? And we have a great time talking about it because we're in relationship with each other. And it doesn't matter to us that the other has a slightly different belief. Sometimes we'll try and see if we can equate it. And if we don't, we just go, no, I can't hold on to that. But hey, the job of all traditions is for us to be as good and kind and loving and as close to God as we can. The Lurianic Kabbalah teaches that it's the job of humanity to mend God's mistake. Now, I don't think God made a mistake, but it is still the job of humanity to reflect God in the world. So we can do exactly the same thing, walking side by side with different beliefs. And that is so important to understand. And the final thing about Kabbalah is it's an oral tradition, which means it must update with every generation. So it's relevant for the time. Otherwise, it becomes a graven image. So even that book, you love of mine, Living Kabbalah, is out of date now.
I'm grateful for your Living Kabbalah book. It is why I reached out to you. One of the topics you did write about in there were the spiritual aspects of the Ten Commandments, and I'm interested to know what's beyond the traditional interpretations and how they can help us in this present day and age.
Sure. Well, Moses was given these commandments 3 times. First time was just verbally, and that represents the oral tradition, which is you're talking directly to God. The second time he wrote them down on sapphire tablets. They were sapphire, so they were see-through. and beautifully coloured. And those are the ones that he smashed when he went down the hill and found that everybody had started worshipping a golden calf. And the third time they were set down in stone. And it's taught in Kabbalah, in Jewish mysticism, for which I have the hugest respect. It really saved my life from the point of view of faith. That they were the first. Start with, they were the advisements. This is how you live to avoid karma. And they're very beautiful if you look at them from the interpretation of the earliest commandment, which is one, I am God. I am that I am. I am transcendent. I am immanent. I am that I am. You are the reflection of the divine. It is your job, as St. Teresa said, to reflect God out in the world. You are the eyes and the ears and the hands of Christ today. You are. Of course, most people are going to run away from that, but there is a truth in it. And it says, for I am, you shall worship only me, for I am a jealous God. Now, that's also a slight mistranslation. It's basically saying, if you put anything else first, then everything else will rule you. You will not be ruled by love. You will be ruled by everything else you put first. So, and that rule is set down. The jealous God refers to what you put out, you get back, which is what we call the law of attraction, but back then was karma. And that's very clear in Deuteronomy. I call heaven and earth to bear witness before you on this day that I have placed before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore, choose life that you and what you sow may live. Couldn't get much clearer than that, could it? And the second commandment is don't make any graven image, which means don't set anything in stone. And every religion sets things in stone. So every religion breaks the second commandment, says you can't have communion, you're not confirmed. You can't do this, you can't do that. The church I'm in has an open altar. Anybody can take communion. Anybody. Why would they not? Jesus was talking to everybody. Jesus shared food with everybody. The third commandment is do not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, which basically means don't misuse the name of God. Do not say God's going to send you to hell. It's not about not going, oh my God, during orgasm. That's perfectly acceptable, I'm quite sure. But it's about, but it's not about using the name of God for harm or lightly, because it's important. The name of God is Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. I am that I am. I am that I am. That is the ultimate name of God. Do not misuse that. And the next commandment is honor the Sabbath and keep it holy. And that means, for God's sake, if God needed to rest, so do you. And we've given up Sabbath. And I know when I was a kid, Sundays were dead boring. You couldn't go to the cinema, you couldn't go out to the shops, you had to do your homework. But on the other hand, when you're an adult, take a day away from the internet. Take a day away from anything violent on the television. Take a day away for your own self-nurturing. Just one day. Not asking for the whole week. One day. It's so important. And if you can't do one day, do half a day. And if you can't do that, do an hour a day, where you just shut the door on the world and go into yourself for replenishment. And the next commandment is honor your mother and father. Now, at the deeper level, that means honor the masculine and feminine and the divine. So we lost that when the second temple came along and threw out Elohim and only worshipped Yahweh. That was what happened. And the second temple also had animal sacrifice. The first temple had sacrifice of bread and wine. Now, doesn't that sound familiar? Only vegetable sacrifice, bread and wine. But the second temple was built with money from Darius, the king of Persia, on condition they had animal sacrifice. So that's the first known political control of religion. Wow. That we know of in that tradition. But it also means, as Louise Hay, the wonderful teacher, said, you chose your parents and they did the best they could with the knowledge they had. You don't have to love them, you don't have to like them, but it's important to know where they came from. I mean, my mum was not a very loving mum, and our relationship was difficult. But once I knew how her mother had treated her, I knew immediately that she had thrown me a softer ball than that. So it was much easier to work on the forgiveness aspect. So I honored her by finding out about her childhood and her upbringing and her beliefs. And the same with my father. So it's about working out why your parents are the way they are. The next one is thou shalt not commit murder. It isn't kill, it's murder. You are permitted to kill in self-defense. You are permitted to kill in defense of your children. You are permitted to kill animals for food. It's a good idea to bless them if you can, and make absolutely sure you're not buying meat that is messed with, or the animals were crudely treated. We're so lucky we live in a rural community, and what meat we buy is either wild meat or home killed, which is an absolute blessing for us, and we're very blessed in that. But it also means do not murder psychologically, do not kill yourself psychologically, do not shut yourself off from the divine. In Kabbalah, that commandment's placed at the place called Tiferet, which is the place of the true self, the core star, the access to the heart. And when you close that off by killing your desire to be the best you can, you close that off to God. And also, you must never murder somebody else's hopes or dreams. If somebody comes up to you with a pipe dream, which you think is utterly, utterly ridiculous or stupid, you say, oh my goodness, how interesting, do tell me more. You don't say, you're a stupid idiot, stop it. Because you're murdering their dreams. And for all you know, they might be a prophet. They might also be a daft idiot, but we all only learn through our experiences. Next one is do not commit adultery. To adulterate means to add poison that destroys something. It does not mean having sex with somebody else outside marriage. Now, if you have sex with somebody outside marriage and it poisons your relationship, that is adultery. But I've known of marriages where actually bringing a third person in to have sex when the wife couldn't or didn't want to but still loved her husband has actually saved that marriage. That is not adultery, because everybody was happy with the idea, but it must be to mutual consent of everyone. So to adulterate is to put poison in, which takes you straight back to the murder one. You cannot break one of these commandments without breaking every single one of them. You really can't. Because if you put poison in somebody, you're destroying them, you're murdering them. And if you keep poison in yourself, which is refusing to let go of your grief or your wounds or work on them, you get something called woundology, which means that your wound becomes your identity, and then you can't let go of it. And you'll use it as a weapon against people who want you to grow. And genuine tragedies can be used as woundologies. Caroline Mace, who's an amazing teacher, talks of a woman whose daughter was killed in a car crash. Now, that's a terrible thing. The worst thing that can happen is the death of your child, because it seems so out of the order of things. And obviously you adore your child. But after a while, you need to assimilate that death. And if you can't assimilate that death, if you just say, it's unfair, it's terrible, my life is ruined, then you start ruining the lives of the rest of your family, your other children, for a start thinking they can never, they can never be worthy. And you start to poison yourself. And then you make that wound, oh no, you can't possibly ask that of me. Don't you know what I've gone through? And you can tell by that tone of voice that wound is being honored more than the life force of that person. And that will create at some point illness, because it's denying the life force, it's denying everything. The next one, the last ones are simpler. Do not steal. Do not steal ideas. Do not steal reputations. And also in the Hebrew, the word hod means the way, and it means don't block anybody's way. So it's similar again. And mystically, it means do not treat people as things. They're not there for your convenience. The Jesus teaching on adultery in the heart, which is difficult for people, is a meld of those two. Because if you commit adultery in your heart, if you look on somebody and it's not actually just going, whoa, they're gorgeous, that's fine. It's actually fantasizing about having sex with them or kissing them, because that is a violation of their auric field. You are pushing yourself into them energetically. It's a form of rape.
My goodness, I haven't heard it put that way, but wow, that rings true.
So you're stealing from them. Yeah. Then the next commandment is do not bear false witness. Well, obviously, sometimes you have to tell a lie. My bishop had a wonderful phrase, which are, there are lies and there are bandages for the soul. I mean, for example, if somebody shows you them in their wedding dress and says, does my bum look big in this? You do not say hell yes.
Unless they want it to. That's a thing now, right?
Yeah, absolutely. They really want that. Exactly. You've got to be discerning and loving about this. But as a general, not bearing false witness means don't knock people down, don't gossip. And most reality TV is gossip. Don't gossip. Don't spread rumors about people. Don't listen to all this gossip on the news. And there's stuff going around about Taylor Swift at the moment, which is all gossip. And it's used for harm. So speak the truth whenever you can. And if you can't speak the truth with love, apply a bandage for the soul. And the final one, which is the one that you'll never hear preached on in a church, is do not covet, which is basically, I want and I will take. I want what you've got and I will take. And nearly all marketing is based on the inherent desire to covet. I need that to make me better. And that is the worst of all the commandments, because I want will lead you to tell untruths. It will lead you to steal. It will lead you to be adulterous. It will lead you to murder. You won't honor people. You won't take a rest. And once you got what you want, you then have to protect it. And then also you get the addiction of wanting more. And we live in a world that's addicted to wanting more. We want the easy path and we want more. And this is what's going really, really wrong in the world today, because we want more from the planet. We want more for our money. We want more, 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 more. And it's in the 12 Steps program, Alcoholics Anonymous, is basically explaining that alcohol is the same thing. It's more of what does not work. Our egos desire more and more of what does not work, which is why we want more. If it works, you don't need more. And I live a really astonishingly simple life. I have too many strings to my bow, but my life is incredibly simple. And I have enough. I have enough. And that is the greatest blessing of all.
And when you talk about that, I can see that last, that 10th commandment, because it goes into that what we have, then we want to protect and we want to defend, and then we can go all the way into wars and
exactly.
And how that
Putin covers Ukraine. Covets Ukraine. Israel covets the land the Palestinians are on. The Palestinians covet the land the Israelites are on. We in the UK and people in America and possibly in Australia as well, I don't know about your politics, don't want the immigrants. It's our land, my land. You can't have it. No, land doesn't belong to anyone. Land belongs to the planet. And there's enough food on this planet to feed every single person. The problem is distribution and I want.
So instead of, when people are talking about desire or true desire, how does that differ from I want?
Oh, well, that's an excellent question. We all feel desire. We all look at things and think, oh my goodness, how lovely it would be to have that. And if the other person is amenable and willing, you can get into a wonderful symbiotic relationship where you do get that. However, it's got to be with mutual agreement. As soon as you want to take, that's where the problem arises. If you're willing to negotiate or ask or request, then that's a different matter. And if you do want something, oddly, I used to teach prosperity for many years until I didn't need to teach it, because you most teach what you most need to learn. But I learned more and more and more that if I needed and I asked, I received. And that's the basic teaching of Jesus. Ask believing and you will receive. But we ask not believing. I've got a vicar friend who is awake enough, bless him, to say it disturbs him. He sees people going into his church. They walk up to the altar rail and they'll kneel down and they'll ask and they'll pray and they'll say, please help, please help, please help. And for a moment, they'll have the relief. And then they'll stand up, walk away, and he can watch them energetically pick up the problem and walk out again with it. They don't leave the problem behind. And that's a form of covetous as well. I actually don't believe that you're going to sort my problem, so I'm going to pick up and fuss about it. There's a whole story in the Hebrew Testament. The women's stories in the Hebrew Testament are extraordinary, and they're hidden in plain sight because they are stories of the divine feminine. They tell the whole story of the human soul. in development. From the matriarchs up to the stories of Esther and Hannah. And the story of Hannah is the perfect teaching about this. She can't have children, and she's praying for children. She goes to the temple in Jerusalem, and she is praying so fervently the high priest thinks she's drunk. And she's saying to God, we're in this together. Give me a child. The child is yours. I will give the child back to you. The child may be whatever the child needs to be. I will not own the child. But please, 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 may I have a child? And then she gets up and she says, right, that's it. I've made my plea. It will be answered. The answer will be yes or no. I don't worry about it ever again. And she goes away and she gets pregnant. And she has a child who becomes the prophet Samuel, who does choose to go and live in the temple. And then she has other children for herself. So it's not easy, this teaching, but it's simple. Can you see what I mean? It's basically put your problem before God and then accept that it's been heard. And the answer will be yes, or it will be no. And if it's no, it will be a loving no. And later on, you'll know why. And I never had children. I actually chose not to have children because I didn't want to pass on the demon, if you like, of mental health issues from my mother. And I knew at the time when I was married and I was could possibly have children, I was aware enough to know that I would not be a good mother. I would take that on. So I deliberately said, no, I am not taking this curse any further. But there was a part of me that would have wanted children. So God gave me stepchildren and gave me a son of my own, the adopted son of my own.
Oh.
And I still tear up because I adore him. I only met him when he was in his 20s. And I met him at King's Cross Station in London because his father was my then new husband's best friend. And his father was murdered.
Oh.
He saved the life of an elderly woman. It was an extraordinary story. And actually it turned out to be, he wanted to go, so he chose to go as a hero, which was amazing. But his son lived in Edinburgh, and of course he had to come down to identify his father's body, and his mother, an absent mother, so it was just his father and him. And obviously, because Lion, my husband, was John's best friend, we said, we'll meet you. We drove down from Birmingham, where we lived at the time, to take him. And of course, having been a journalist and having worked as a hospice chaplain, I was quite comfortable with death and dead bodies. So I met him and we just fell in love with each other on the spot. Not as in sexual love, but I went, oh, it's you. So the first experience was holding his hand as he identified the body of his dead father. But, he calls us mum and dad number 2 and has done for a long time. So I'm tearing up, but it's just so beautiful.
Me too. That is a beautiful story that, you ended up with a son after all.
Yes. I actually wanted a daughter, but hey, that just goes to show God knows better than I do.
I actually had a weird dream about you last night that you did have a daughter. So that's really strange.
I think I do have a daughter. Yeah, I know who she is.
We were in the ocean swimming, and we were finding these beautiful pieces of jewelry, and these crustaceans, these animals were recreating the jewelry. It was really beautiful, and the ocean was clear. There was sand at the bottom of the ocean.
Do you know what you were doing? You incredible woman, you were intuiting the mystical feminine story of creation.
Really? That's amazing.
At the beginning of chapter 1, a human is placed in Eden. It is androgynous, male and female created, we, them both. It is one being known as Adam Kadmon in Kabbalah. And then later on, it says God saw that it was not good for the human to be alone. So that one being was divided into 2, which became Adam and Eve. And people go on this silly legend of Lilith, and I'm sorry to be disparaging about it. I can go on about it for ages, being Adam's first wife, because they say, well, hang on, there were 2 of them to start with. No, there was one androgynous being. It's really important for us to know that with the transgender issues going on at the moment, that, the original human being was basically transgender, hermaphrodite. Anyway, so Adam and Eve are in Eden, which is it was not a physical place. It's in paradise, in the heavens. And this human and all of creation are there ready to come down. And presumably evolution is going on Earth so that the bodies are developing so that the human souls can come in once we got to the Neanderthals or whatever that was. And there were indeed two trees in the forest, but they didn't have to eat because they weren't human. They weren't physical. They didn't need to eat. But what was happening was this was the divine baby. The feminine story is that God was in so much joy that God wished to have a child, and humanity is the child. So this first androgynous being, Adama or Adam, is the child. It's in the uterus, which is Eden, but it's not growing. And God can't understand why it's not growing. It's not developing to be born on the earth. And God's concerned about this. And she's passing over the earth, her beautiful creation, which she created for the humans. And she sees down in the depths an oyster with a pearl. And she goes down and says, "Oyster, what is that within you? What is it? Because I didn't make that." And the oyster says, "Oh, my beloved, I hope you don't mind, but a piece of grit got into my shell and it hurt. So I created this to soothe myself. Do you not like it?" And the Elohim said, "Like it? It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. And you made it from grit." Oh. And then she went back to Eden and she called the man and the woman to her and said, "Okay, you can do anything you like here. You know that, don't you? There's a tree over there. Don't touch it. There's a tree over there. Don't pick the fruit. Don't eat it. You do anything you like. Don't eat that. That's real. Yeah, don't eat it." And then went. Now, you've got kids. You've got kids. You think God is thicker than you? No. You have a child, a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old, and you have them in the room. You say, "Mummy's going out for 10 minutes. You'll be absolutely fine. Do anything you like. Play with your toys. Don't open that box. Anything you like. Don't open that box. Anything you want to do, do not open that box." You wouldn't have time to get down the corridor, would you?
Exactly.
And you think God didn't know that? No, the whole Tree of Life thing was a setup because we had to learn about choice and consequence. And if we didn't learn that some things, what God would say, "Don't do that, it will hurt," then we wouldn't grow. And as soon as the Elohim had placed that tree in the garden and told them not to eat it, and Eve, the woman, went and started the learning process. And it was the woman that made the baby start to gestate and grow. And if there was a sin, it wasn't that. It wasn't the disobedience, because all children disobey, all humans disobey. It was the blame, because when God went back and said, "Where are you?" Now, she knew perfectly well where they were. She meant, "Where are you emotionally? You know, what's going on for you? And did you eat from the tree I told you not to eat from?" Which she knew perfectly well that they had. And Adam said, "It was the woman. She gave me the fruit." And then Eve said, "It was the serpent, but then I ate." So Eve takes some responsibility, but Adam takes none.
Yes, that makes so much more sense.
Absolutely. And do you know there is no concept of original sin in Judaism? Yes, we disobeyed, and because of that, we came down to earth. God made for us coats of skin, made us physical, and took us down into the earth where life can be nasty, brutish, and short, and where there is also pain. And there's a bit in which is translated as, you shall conceive and give birth in sorrow and pain, he says to Eve. It's not true. That's not what the Hebrew says. It says, by a snare you will be deceived, and this will bring pain. How different is that?
Mm.
If you allow yourself to be deceived into doing the wrong thing, it will bring you pain. There's nothing about conception in that at all.
Incredible. I know we are almost out of time today, but I have one last question, which may take a little bit. When when God said that he made us in his image,
Her image.
her image, nice.
Actually, it's their image. It's a plural.
Their image.
Elohim is a plural. God it actually says we will make humanity in our image. Yes. That means we have free will. We have power, we have free will, and we can command the angels. Humanity can command angels. Angels are servants of God. Humans are children of God. So if you know how to be, I won't say a priest because priestcraft is sometimes deadly, but if you know how to be in direct relationship with the Holy One, you can affect your life. You have power. You can bring things to passing by requests and by good thoughts and good feelings. And that is meant to be the purpose of prayer. But of course, what we have done is built God in our image, which is nasty, vengeful, calculating. And that's our problem, is we built God in our image. And we forget that we are pure beings of love. We are spirits in a human body. And unfortunately, now we live in cities. We aren't actually coming down in incarnations to learn how to live and love this planet.
Which is amazing, which actually brings us right back to the start of our conversation about fearing God, and because it's man that we truly fear.
Yeah, it's man that we truly fear, and we projected on that to God, and we translated it to make it a controlling, angry God. And this happened in Christianity when in 313 in the Christian era, when Emperor Constantine adopted Christianity as the official religion of Rome. Until then, it was the faith of the underdog, the women, the slaves, and the poor, and people lived in community and shared all their goods. But once it became the religion of empire, they simply replaced Jupiter with Jesus, and Jupiter was the god of thunder.
Incredible.
A warring god on a throne. The first images of Jesus all on the walls, painted on walls, are all of a shepherd with a short tunic. Never long robe, never in a toga, never sitting on a throne, never laying down the law.
It's incredible how much has been distorted. Thank you so much for all of the time you have spent with us today. I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Is there anything else you would like to share with our listeners before we finish up?
I would suggest a little mantra and also an affirmation. Most of your listeners will know about affirmations. And the most powerful one I know is I am God force. Because you can't deny it. You are made of stardust. You are made of the whole of the force. If God created the universe, God also created you, and God created the universe with God force. So you are God force. You are the power in your life. You've just learned not to believe that. So I say I am God force 100 times a day when I'm walking the dogs. And to start with, it feels really difficult, but it's actually beautiful once you get used to it. And another is, this is a mantra, which is to do if you meditate or if you sit quietly to try and connect God. And to say, this was from Father Richard Rohr. His website is cac.org, the Centre for Action and Contemplation. To say to yourself very gently, God's life is living itself in me. I am aware of life living itself in me. And that's really beautiful, because you can feel that opening your energy centers, your chakras, and cleansing your aura. Can you feel it? Would you like to say it with me? God's life is living itself in me.
God's life is living itself in me.
I am aware of life living itself in me.
I'm aware of life living itself in me.
Can you feel that?
It brings you really back into the present. It's a beautiful,
Doesn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
beautiful grounding.
Well, remember, the name of God is I am. It's not I was or I will be. It's I am. It's all in this present moment. This is all we have. And I'm very glad to spend it with you.
Thank you so much for today. It's been an absolute pleasure. I appreciate you very, very much.
And I appreciate you too. It was lovely speaking with you. Thanks.
As we end today's episode of the Divine Style podcast, I extend my deepest gratitude for your presence and openness on this journey of self-love, self-discovery, and spiritual growth. Farewell for now, and may your journey inward bring you the self-love you seek.